Host Paul Hollis, author of the Hollow Man series and owner of Hollow Man Publishing, and Frank Fiore of Fridays with Frank. Frank, how are you? Oh my goodness, he's speaking my language today.
Yeah.
Frank, let's go. Our guest today's Hurley Fox, and he is going to talk about the challenges of cash flow. I mean, for businesses, any type of business, cash flow is the way that stops the scalability, Hurley, right? If you don't have cash flow, even if you have the greatest business idea in the world and you got people coming out of the roof, at one point in time, cash flow is a discussion.
Yeah, cash flow is what pays the bills, right? You can't pay people with revenue or potential or hypothetical growth. So it's the variable that causes the most stress to business owners because it's what they feel.
All right, for Hurley, let's just jump really quickly into specifically your background, and then we're
Yeah.
going to get into the interview.
Yeah, so I worked in construction management while I was going to school. I went to school actually to become a teacher, a history teacher. Got my teaching degree and license to teach, but liked the business world over the educational world. Loved being in a classroom, but the rest of it was not for me. So stayed in the business world. Then I went to go work with an accountant for a year. When I was with the accountant, I realized there was just a big disconnect between business owners and business professionals. And so I saw people getting their tax returns back with no discussion or financials back without really looking at to see if the numbers are correct or is there a conversation. So I started a program where I would just meet with the business owners once a month and we would do their financials and we would just have a dialogue. And so that program grew while I was at that firm. And so then I started my company kind of off that program, went back to school, got my master's degree in accounting, learned a bunch about accounting, online courses, books, started hiring people who knew way more than I did about accounting. And we started getting bigger and bigger clients. And so now we work with about 200 businesses all across the country in every type of industry. There's 10 people who work with me, and we do outsourced controller and CFO services, and then kind of consulting on top of that.
Okay, go ahead, Frank, for your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I mean, cash flows, yes, for business is very important, but it's also for households. And I
Yeah,
have cash flow and handle cash flow in our household because it's a business too.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, what do you think the biggest impediment is to doing a proper cash flow?
Well, the personal one is a really good thing to bring up, right? And so when I start, first, there's an education gap with business owners and just in terms of understanding financial statements. And so one of the first things I'll do is we'll do their personal budget and net worth first, right? And your personal budget is kind of like a business's profit and loss, right? What do you spend and what do you make? And then a personal net worth statement, what you own and what you owe, is like a business's balance sheet. And so we use the personal to kind of understand some terms and understand how money moves. The biggest impediment, as with most things, is A, getting started, and B, being consistent, right? And so when people like that first action of writing down the debt you owe personally is usually the hardest part to becoming debt free because there's so much fear and anxiety to what you owe. And until you see it on paper and you kind of specify the fears and the amounts, it's really hard to have a plan and go forward. So it's the getting started part, and then it's being consistent. It's month after month after month. You're not going to be debt free in a week. You got to keep at it, and month after month.
Well,
Okay, so
the strategy that I used when we had credit card, well, yeah, we had a lot of credit cards. Uh, in order to get a handle on those credit cards, I would take the lowest amount balance credit card, and I would pay just the minimums on the other credit cards,
Yep.
then pay as much as I can on that first little balance one, and wipe that out, then do the same strategy as you move up. And so at
Yeah.
least you get rid of the balances, and then eventually they are paid off as opposed to the paying those minimums even on all those
right,
cards. You don't get anywhere.
Yeah, it's Dave Ramsey's snowball method, right?
yeah,
But write down what you spend money on. Is there room for improvement? How much money do you make? What you need that delta to be? Put the plan together, and then it's okay. Here's how much cash could be left over. What are we doing with it? And so
right.
in your case, it was we're going to use it to the credit cards with the lowest balances. And then yeah, you can cut that credit card up. You get a nice win, and the momentum keeps going.
Okay, so Hurley, I want to get to business. Here's the deal. Cash flow is king when you're trying to scale a business. I did tutoring business, same thing happened to me. Another marketing business I had, same thing happened to me. Now I'm in that same phase again, where I'm looking at maybe moving into more of a podcast agency. Why? Because I can have a team, but I don't have the ability to scale customizably to the level that you need cash flow wise. A business can grow so fast, but the problem is it's all about when the clients pay, when if the money comes in, what if you lose it, what if there's churn, all these things are involved. How do you help people through this process?
Yeah. So we start with education, and then we make sure that their current numbers are correct, because most small businesses don't have correct accounting, right? There's something wrong with the balance sheet, or there's something wrong with the profit and loss. So if we don't know the numbers are correct, we don't want to give any advice, right? It's like if you go to the doctor, don't just give advice, get the blood, understand kind of your diet and what you do. So those are the first two things. And then it's understanding, all right, if you did, let's say, X in terms of increasing revenue or cutting expenses, how much extra cash would that allow you to do? And then where are you going to put that cash if you're trying to grow, right? But a lot of small business owners should really think about having their cash flow fund their business instead of either from debt or trying to, hey, I'm going to keep scaling it and get revenue to a certain point, and then eventually I'll sell it, right? And so what that's going to do, though, is it's going to make it a much slower journey, but it's a much healthier one, and because you're surviving each and every day. The other thing, too, that I would do just from the beginning is, as you're scaling, make sure you're paying yourself, right? Every business from the beginning can and should pay the owner what they're worth. If it can't, then you got to think about something different.
Right. 100%.
So don't keep kicking down the road of eventually I'll be able to sell this company for 10x.
So Hurley, when do you scale? When does it? I know
when cash is allowing you to do so.
But
right.
So you don't recommend loans as cash flow as a way to scale?
It would be within moderation. So I would look at the type of loan, and what it's going to be specifically used for. Yeah, because plenty of businesses scale with cash flow. It just takes a little longer, right? The businesses, like, I never come on board with somebody who's saying, hey, I'm growing, but just a little too slowly. I come on board when it's, hey, I have too much debt, I need to get out of it, right? And so, especially at first, scale with cash flow. Once you've proven your model, right? When you say something, it does happen, then you can get a little more flexible with debt because there's less risk there. But early on, when people are saying, well, I'm going to grow at X amount, that's not proven, right? And so don't fund something that you don't really know is going to come to fruition. But once you get a few years in, let's say, right, then you have a much better sense of how many new clients you get on a month, or what your actual expenses are, or what you really need in order to grow. And then you can say, okay, I can take on X amount of debt with these variables in mind. And if I watch that and I can see that's not going in that direction, I can turn it off without getting myself in too big of a jam.
All right, Paul, what question you have for Hurley?
Hi, Hurley. I think you actually answered one of my questions, but I have another one. What is the general size of a company that you work with, sort of thing?
So our smallest clients are doing $100 million in revenue. Our largest are doing $100 million in revenue. And so the companies that are much, much bigger, it's very different, right? And it's a very different scenario that we're playing with on the debt side. But if you're on the smaller side, you just want to be a lot more careful, because you can get tripped up. And then before you even get going, your debt payments are suffocating you. And real quick, the killer on debt regarding cash flow is this. If you have $100,000 profit for the end of the year in a company, and you use $70,000 of that profit to pay off your debt, right, that you took on to get there, you pay tax on the income, not cash flow. So you pay tax on the $100,000 of income, even though you only have $30,000 left in the bank. Right. And so that kills a lot of small businesses. I made money, you made income, you used a lot of that income to pay off debt, so you have no cash left, and then you're still stuck with a tax bill. Where do you pay the taxes from?
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. And it's something, Hurley, that they don't teach a lot. They don't teach entrepreneurs anyways. So what you've just told me now, and say, well, I figured it out in the Hurley. And that means that a lot of times that in your entrepreneur journey, you're going to put a lot of hours in till you finally see that you're getting the certain amount of money. And that's why certain businesses are successful, infiltrate their own cash to start the business, where it's not loans. They just use their cash. They cashed out from a retirement. They cashed out from a specific other business, that maybe a company they worked for, and started it instead of taking on more debt. And it makes absolute sense. What do you think is the biggest challenge for people? Because have companies from $1 million to 100 million. You get to see their journey to $1 million. What of revenue a year? What do you think that journey takes to go from upper six figures to seven-figure revenue as a business?
One of the hardest parts just about growth in general is there's different stages and you have to do things differently when you're at each stage. But because you're the same person along that journey, it's very hard to realize internally, oh, I'm at a different part of this journey, right? So your first $200,000 of revenue, you earn that the hardest way possible, right? Of like funding it through cash flow and just grinding it out. And then as you start to climb, then you can start to spend that money into saving more of your time, right? And so let me now get an assistant. Let me hire somebody really good. Let me get this agency on board, right? You don't do what you did from 0 to 1 million to get from 1 million to 10 million, right? And the debt is the same thing. Don't start with debt because there's just nothing there. But once you have some friction or some stuff going, or you have some assets, then you can take on debt at a level where you're comfortable if you had to pay it off, right? So if you're doing $1 million a year, $10,000 of debt is nothing, right? If you're just starting out, $50,000 of debt is a lot. And so it's just kind of understanding kind of where you are there. And then, but as you're growing, I mean, everyone says it, but really put the best people around you possible. And for small business owners, that means you're going to pay them a lot more than you ever thought you would. But do it, they'll result in a return on investment. Think value, not cost.
Exactly. Okay, Frank, you're a question for Hurley.
Not really. I mean, he did a good job answering that. And again, since you're going to be expanding your business, you really,
So I'm always picking people's brains, learning. No, I was expanding. Now I'm tweaking. This is the thing Hurley has to explain, that if you're a smart entrepreneur or business owner, you have to make changes if they're going well, but ultimately, do you want to live that life?
Right.
And you got to go with the times. We are seeing an absolute change with AI on how everything is operating. And if you do not move with the times, you've lost.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one kind of example I'll give is, so we have one client where they do about $7 million in revenue. And they've always had the growth mindset, right? I want to do 10, 20, $30 million in revenue. What I really look at is what's the cash flow being generated. And we want to get to 10 to 20% of revenue cash flowing, right? So if you're doing $1 million in revenue, we should be seeing $100,000 to $200,000 of cash flow to the business owner. If you're not, well, what can we tweak, to your point? So they were not cash flowing when we started with them. And now they're hitting that 10% cash flow mark at that $6-7 million range. So they're hundreds of thousands of dollars now cash flowing. And so then the question really becomes, well, why do you want to keep growing, right? You're there. You're at $500,000 plus in cash flow. What's the problem with that, right? Tweak for a little bit. Make it so you're not as stressed out. Make it so each client is a little more profitable, so your systems are a little more clean. And then let a couple years of really good cash flow hit to see, do you really want to kind of go back in and do it again?
That's the problem, Hurley. You got to start really young. I'm 51 and say, am I going to do 20 hours a day like I was doing 20 hours a day 6 months ago? Now I'm back to 16 or 12.
Right.
Do you want to continue to do that? Because the more work you do, the more you could scale, but your lifespan and your lifestyle life, and you see some of these entrepreneurs that never sleep and never do things.
Yeah.
And then is it a profitability? How profitable can you make it? And I'm sure when you work with your clients, you could say, this is what's going to look like if you could get to 40 million.
Yeah.
You're going to have to hire X amount of people. You're going to have to do X amount of things, right, Hurley?
Right. Yeah. And then it goes back to the personal thing, right? Of why are you really doing it all, right? Because you're doing the business for a specific reason. And so, Neil, you may be like, if I made $200,000 passively from this business or $400,000 actively from the business, I'd be good. And then we get there. The hard part about the entrepreneur is then saying, well, I'm good.
I want to get bigger.
You want to get bigger.
I want to get bigger
Right.
and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you have no lifestyle, no friends, and no family, and nothing. That's the problem of entrepreneurship. If you're so passionate about it, it could become a serious addiction. I think that's where the mental health issues are with entrepreneurs and business owners. And you got to say, and then I think you got to know what you're worth. And ultimately, as that business owner scales, what are they worth an hour when they're working with all these different people and all these things? So I'm bringing a team of people together and all my amazing clients that have specific expertise that can connect to each other and all those different things. And now I know why there's so many coaches out there, because they sure as heck don't want to scale. So they scale through coaching so they don't have to hire anybody, and they make money per hour And it is, it's a process for sure. Where's best place people can find information on you, Hurley? This is great
Yeah, so
information.
you can see Fox and Partners on www.foxandpartners.com, foxandpartners.com, or there's not a lot of Hurley Foxes in the world, so search my name, my LinkedIn will come up. You can find me on LinkedIn and a bunch of stuff from there.
All right. You're listening and watching the Neil Haley Show and Fridays with Frank. And